Hello, I'm Donna Scale, along with my co-host Tiffany Ross. Welcome to A Time to Dream. We're brought to you by Roaring Lambs Ministry, a ministry that wants to help you tell your story of what God has done in your life. You know, He's allowed certain circumstances in your life, and you can give Him glory for that by sharing your story, and we invite you to do that. Roaring Lambs Ministries, you can read more about us at roaringlambs.org. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever had this dream in your heart and you just see it? You see it happening and you think about it every day and you can't wait for it to happen, but then it just seems to be put on pause and it's not happening as quick as you want it to. Well, our guest today knows all about that firsthand because she has a dream in her heart and she's not going to let it go, and she's waiting patiently for it to come to be. So welcome Hollie Taylor. Hollie is a single parent to a very talented daughter, Emily. They are both creative people who desire to reach Italians with the gospel. You know, God put on Hollie's heart Italy. She's been to Italy, she loves the Italian people, and she wants them desperately to know about God. She is being sent by the village church as support to a recent Acts 29 church plant. Hollie currently teaches elementary school. She teaches art there, and she has the intent of soon being fully funded into full-time missions work. While ministering in Italy, Emily will also pursue art in Florence and focusing on 2D animation. So welcome to A Time to Dream, and we're honored. We met several years ago through a mutual, 10 years ago?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
My 10-year Jesus birthday is coming up this year.
Oh, wow. Well, Debbie Stewart, a mutual friend of ours, introduced us. And she looks 10 years younger today than she looked the day I met her. I look 20 years older.
No, you don't.
But anyway, it's good to reconnect. And we always like to start at the beginning. So let's go back to the beginning of your life and tell us a little bit about your childhood and what growing up was like.
Well, I grew up in Plano, Texas, in just an average family. My mom worked for Frito-Lay. My dad worked with computer programming at JCPenney back when it had a big green cursor, you know, those massive computers. And I have a sister who is 8 years older than I. And on January 6, 1986, he passed away. And so I really don't remember much of my childhood. But when he passed away, my mom tells it to me that I wasn't really ever the same.
You were 6
I was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And your sister was 13?
Yes, she was 13.
And how did your dad pass? It was rather traumatic for you.
Yeah, it was his 3rd heart attack.
Mm.
Yeah, he that morning we actually had breakfast together, and we never ate breakfast together, because busy getting ready for school. And after breakfast, he went for a jog. My mom swears that's what killed him.
Mm.
And when he came back, he had a heart attack. Yeah.
And died in front of you?
Yes, I believe so, or en route to hospital. I'm not sure. I just remember my sister was trying to keep me out of the room, and I looked under her legs, and I saw my dad's head turning purple.
Sorry about that.
So after that point, like your mom said, that she just saw a change in you.
Yeah.
And how did she describe that change? What did it look like to her?
I've always been an extrovert, and I still have that, but I didn't smile like I did before. I wasn't as outgoing, and over the years, I just became more and more angry. After my father died, we had an uncle who came to live with us to help. and he lived with us. I know he lived with us, but I don't have a lot of memories of it. And he was a believer. He was charismatic, and it was very flashy and loud. And then my mom came to Christ, and to me, if that's what being a Christian looked like, I didn't want to have any part of it, because it did not seem genuine to me. And it wasn't very kind either. It was very legalistic in a sense, fundamentalist. And so, I didn't want anything to do with it. And then also my mom she was gone all the time. And now as a believer, I look back on it, she only had what she had, and I know what it was like when I was saved. Like, I was learning things left and right, but I have a very clear memory of being 13-ish, and I was doing dishes, and there was like a wall cloud outside. And the weather was bad, and my mom went to go to Bible study, left me at home, and I thought I was going to die that night. And so I think there was a piece that felt like, okay, God took my dad, and now he's taking my mom. So I was just left behind, and so I was really angry.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder to all of us that God is love, and Jesus loves us, and he wants everyone to know how much he loves them. And so when we witness to people about Jesus, it's not a hit you over the head type gospel, it's a love gospel. And we need to be sensitive, because not everybody's ready to receive him when you speak to them about him. And you have to be sensitive to allow the Holy Spirit to let you know how and how much to really aim at them at that point. And I know that you were angry. You got angry at God. You were angry at yourself, and you began to do some self-harmful things.
Yes.
And we just looked up some recent statistics and found that 17% of all people will hurt themselves, will apply self-harm to mask, to cover up, to act out. And of that 17%, 45% use cutting. And cutting is really when you take sharp objects and literally cut yourself. So I know that you experienced that. I know a lot of parents are probably wondering about their own kids and whether they're doing that. And so talk a little bit about cutting and why you did that, how you did that, and what it accomplished.
Well, for me, cutting was a way, you heard the phrase, blood is the life, right? Well, I didn't like my life, and if the blood left, it was a way to release the pain and the anger that I felt. It felt like it was literally leaving my body. The more I cut, the more pain was gone. It was also a pain I could control, because I couldn't control the outside circumstances. I couldn't control the death of my father. I couldn't control what happened at home with my uncle living with us. I couldn't control other things that may or may not have happened because I have no memory of them. But I do know that of people who cut, 50% of them are usually women, and of that, most of them have experienced some kind of sexual trauma. And so I can't speak to that, but I know if the Lord wants me to know, he will reveal that. He's faithful and he's good to do that. But I don't need to dig for what I don't know.
So you had one moment though of cutting. Do you still remember the number of times on either arm that day?
Yeah, it's, so I got mad at my mom, and I was really angry, and I cut on this arm like 167 times, and over here like 70 or something, I can't remember, but it was just an angry, real quick. I used to keep a razor blade in my pocket.
Oh my gosh.
I go to school with a razor blade. I have problems in math. I didn't get it diagnosed until I was a junior in college.
Wow.
So I had to go through high school and middle school with this dyscalculia, and it's like you could do math, and I enjoyed it. It was fun, but when we checked my homework, everything was wrong. So it's just an everyday reinforcing that you're stupid.
Explain what that is. I've never heard that term before.
Dyscalculia is mathematic dyslexia.
Interesting.
So I would understand the process, but I would make something positive when it should be negative, and I'd get the wrong answer, but I couldn't see it. So every day I was told I was stupid.
Yeah.
And I'd get mad, and if I didn't have a razor, I'd use the back of an earring and poke my veins.
I just can't imagine how that felt. I mean, that had to really hurt when you do that.
Yeah, it did. It hurt more when it would start to scab over. So then you just cut again. So it's a cycle that keeps going. And I remember I ran into somebody I went to middle school with on Facebook, you know, and I said, you know, looking back, what did you think when you saw me? And he's like, I felt that I needed to say hello because I don't know if you'll be here tomorrow. And that's the way it was with my family. Like, nobody thought I'd live to see 16. And when I did, because most people planned their proms and their weddings, I planned my funeral right down to the flowers.
Would you talk about it a lot too? Like, that you wanted to die and you just didn't want to be here?
I don't know. I can't remember. I know I used to voice about, I wasn't loud about it. You know, it was just something I really wanted. I would almost fantasize about walking down the street and being shot in the back.
So
You know?
it would be safe to say that you were also dealing with depression at this time.
I was clinically depressed. My mother put me in therapy right after my father died, and she always gave me a male counselor, I guess, to try to bridge that gap. And it was a Christian counselor, and for the first 2 years, I didn't speak to them at all. We played Uno.
Wow.
So I was in counseling from the age of 6 until about 16. I was hospitalized for outpatient in like 7th grade maybe, and then the time when I cut my arms up, all that, I was put into inpatient hospital. And that's where things got better.
What would you say to parents that might be watching this, that might suspect that their child is doing this? What would you tell them?
I would tell you to stop and just listen to your kids. They want to, may not act like it, but they want your ear and they want your time. They don't want information. I'm having to learn this as a mother of a teenager myself, and it's so hard. But just listening to them and to find yourself a good biblical counselor to help walk you through that. Because ultimately it really has to be the Lord meeting them where they are.
And I really resonate with that because I have a young family member who's dealing with that and had to do a behavioral hospital, all of that. It's rough.
Yeah.
And so the good news is, even though you have not really accepted Jesus at this point, you're seeing now some light again. It's like you're getting better, you know?
Yeah, it was, for me, I describe my life before inpatient hospital as black and white. It was very dreary, very dark, but then afterward, it was like walking through a Mary Poppins video. Like it was full of color, and Mary Poppins is my favorite movie ever. And so, and there was singing, and I mean, it was just brighter, but it was also very secular. I got into art. I mean, I was born with a crayon, my mom says, and I've always drawn people. It's what I remember in elementary school drawing portraits of women with purple and blue eyeshadow. Yes, it was the 80s.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
and so, but I've always drawn people. But it was, you know, in my middle school years when I was cutting, like I had paintings of bleeding eyeballs all over my room.
Wow.
You know.
Yeah.
And so, but it was just it was the mechanism I had to express how I felt. And that would be another thing you could do, parents, get them into something where they can express themselves with, yeah.
So you pursued your art,
Yes.
and you actually were afforded an opportunity to go to Italy, yes, in college?
Yeah, so I did make it to 16. It's okay. I did make it to 16, and I graduated high school. My senior year of high school really was when I came alive, I guess you could say, in a secular sense. I was in hospital in 10th-ish grade, and my senior year of high school, I went from never having an AP or a higher level class to having AP European History, AP Art History, and AP Studio Art. And that's when I knew art and art history was going to be my life. I remember in like 9th, 10th grade watching the humanities class paint like Michelangelo under the library tables, and I just fell in love with that, but they wouldn't let me be in humanities because of my math problem. And so it was really heartbreaking. But anyway, I got to pursue, that's when I fell in love with Michelangelo and the Renaissance. And the word Renaissance literally means rebirth. And so I think that's a really sweet part of my story, that God would give me a love for a time period that is centered on the rebirth, and particularly the rebirth of the arts from classicism, right? And so more on that, I guess, in a bit. But yeah, so I graduated high school, and I was supposed to go to school at the Art Institute of Chicago, but we couldn't afford it. And so art school in Europe is less expensive, and I ended up going to art school in Florence, Italy. And I was there for 2 years.
Oh my goodness. Well, and who'd have thunk it that art school in Europe is less expensive? I wouldn't have thought that.
Very much so.
Wow.
Even
So,
still today.
oh my goodness. So I'm seeing this connection. So your dad worked at JCPenney all those years ago. My husband was a designer for years, clothing designer at
Oh,
JCPenney.
funny.
So there was one trip I got to go along with him. We went to Florence, and oh my goodness, just I completely understand why you fell in love with the city, because it is just so beautiful, and the food, oh my gosh, all is so good.
Yes.
So that said, actually 9/11 happened while you were there.
Yes.
Would you share with us about that?
Yeah, it was just your average day. I was walking to school, and I remember I was standing by the Posta Nuova, which is the new post office, and I was getting ready to cross the street, and I looked up, and literally everybody was crying. Italians, I mean everybody. And then I just was walking to school, and of course this school is mainly Americans, mostly from New York. This is September, they just got there in August, right? And so I got into our school cafeteria. It's probably about the size of this office, and it was blue cigarette smoke, and there was a little TV up in the corner, and CNN was always in Italian, but this day it was in English, because it was happening so quickly. And then I was like, what is going on? And I look up, and that's when I saw the second thing. I don't know if it was live or not, because we're 7 hours ahead. But so anyway, I stayed up that night. Bush was going to address the nation. I remember the communists and the fascists got into an argument in Piazza del Duomo. I still have my newspaper from 9/12 in Italian. Yeah. So, but because of 9/11, my mother was antsy and said that I had to come home. Yeah.
So you had ordered a book a couple weeks before, and the book arrived right before you left, right?
Right. So it was a new semester, right? And I was getting ready for class. I had ordered a psychoanalytic study of Michelangelo and his life and times, right? And so it had taken like a month to arrive, and it arrived. And I was talking to my mom on the phone, and when I told her, I said, when I opened it, all this powder went everywhere. And she was like, what? And I had no idea what was going on in America. Honestly, I still don't think I know the full story because I never looked it up. But, and I was sick at the time. She said, was the envelope handwritten? And I said, yes. how did you know? And she's like, you have to get to the doctor now. And so that's when she explained to me about anthrax. And so I had to travel an hour to Arezzo to go get this test done. I had a fever, and I got there, and they're like, we don't have what we need. And I was like, really? So I had bronchitis. I was fine.
But
It was really scary for my mom.
For
yeah.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, as
Yeah.
a mom, and you're so
Far
thousands
away.
of miles, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And the airports were being shut down.
Yes.
So she probably wanted you to come home as soon as possible, or
Yeah.
try to get on a flight. They
Yeah.
weren't really landing.
Yeah, and I remember that was the only time coming back to America that they actually weighed my bag, and I had to pay fees because of tax.
Oh.
Mhm.
Right.
I remember being upset about that.
So here you are, you're back in Plano, Texas, wah wah, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, from Florence.
And I was angry.
Yeah,
I was
I bet.
angry. I felt
I bet.
like, because there was something about Florence, like, I felt like I was home. Like, I've never really been, like, I'm Texan through and through. I've never been to a football game. That's unheard of, right? And so in Florence, it was just like it fit.
Mhm. It was all art.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just got plucked up out of that,
Yeah.
and I was angry.
Still probably searching for a place to fit, like that,
Yes.
getting that feeling, right?
Mhm.
And so tell us about, you say for the next 10 years, you're just striving to get back to Italy. What did that period of time look like?
Well, I came back to America, and I realized my best friend wasn't my best friend anymore. She had had a baby, and you know, Johnson & Johnson had it right. Having a baby changes everything. It's the best tagline ever. And we really didn't have a lot in common anymore. And I opened the Starbucks across the street from where a big church here is in the Metroplex, and so I went to work at Starbucks, and I was really lonely, is what I was. I was really lonely. And then in 2004, I became a mom. And within a year of her being a year old, I was a single mom. And so that was hard, and has continued to be so. It's been challenging, but we make it work, you know. And so she recently asked me if abortion was ever something I considered. And I said, absolutely not. Like, it was never a thought in my mind, simply because I know my old best friend has had 5 abortions. And she continues to think about each child and what the birth date would have been.
Wow.
And I'm like, if you want to get rid of something, that means you don't care about it. And I couldn't do that. And so, no, it was never on my radar. So that was a really sweet conversation we had. And it was rough, but we made it.
So tell us about Jarrett, who would come into Starbucks.
Yeah, Jarrett, he was a pastor at the church across the street from my Starbucks. At first, I don't even know if I realized he was a pastor, but it was the strangest thing. We struck up a relationship. And he was just nice to me. One thing I say about Jarrett is that he did not sell Jesus like a salesman. I've had plenty of people, you know, people used to leave tracts in the tip jar with my name on it. You know, because I had piercings everywhere, and they're like, did you know Jesus was pierced? I'm like, really?
Oh.
You know, but that was, you know, that's the kind of people, it's messy to get involved in people's lives. It's much easier to say, here, read this, you know what I mean? And so anyway, but Jarrett was involved in my life. I even remember one time in college, I was writing a story about I was writing a paper about a Spanish painting, and I needed some biblical references on blue and white thread. And I reached out to Jarrett, and he helped me find it, you know, so he was always just there. And then one day, he was in Starbucks, and he had a meeting, and I just took a piece of receipt paper, and I said, thank you for always treating me like a person and never selling Jesus like a salesman. And I gave him that paper. And what I didn't know was that he saved it. And later, when I came to Christ, 10 years later, he did not believe that it was so. He wouldn't believe I was actually a believer until he saw me. And then when he baptized me, he produced the note, and it was literally, it had been folded, and it was literally hanging on by a thread where my name was, and it was just so symbolic to me of that old Hollie is gone, and here I am, new in Christ, and so that was really sweet. Yeah.
Tell us about the time that you came to Christ. Where were you? What drew you to Him, and how did that happen?
Well, through working at Starbucks, really. Funny story, working at Starbucks really uncovered my love for old gospel music. I'm talking about Hollie Jackson, especially Sam Cooke. And I would listen to old gospel. And 2 years before the Lord even saved me, I listened to a song by Sam Cooke called Jesus Gave Me Water on repeat all day for months.
Wow.
And I had no idea what it meant. And then when I came to Christ, you know, everybody tells you to read the book of John. And I'm sitting at Starbucks in the morning, and I get to John 4. And it's about the Samaritan woman, which is what the song is about. And I stood up like an idiot, and I said, "That's where it came from." It was so fun. But anyway, I jump ahead. So Diane, I worked with a gal at Starbucks who went to the school that attached to the church, and so I became friends with her, and her mom just became really involved in my life, especially once I became a single parent. They have a real heart for single parents, and so she just befriended me for 10 years. They would, I think the first time I went over to their house was in the fall, and they had like a fall festival in their backyard, and you know, Amelie bobbed for apples, and you know, so we just developed a friendship. And so I fast forward 10 years, I was working on a book that was spiritual and about creativity, but I was open to it because it didn't talk about Jesus, it was just spiritual. And so I was doing that, and I realized that the thing that was holding me back creatively was my love of Italy. But I didn't have the word for idolatry. That's what it was. And I wrote, they encourage you to write in your journals. And I wrote in my journal that day, I think I have to talk about God. He's the one thing I've never tried. And so that morning, I called Diane. And she left her house, and I said, "Hey, I can't do this on the phone." And she left her house and came to mine and led me to the Lord. And that process, she just knew how to speak to me, and it was all the Lord, you know. She knew I'd been hurt by religion and by people who professed religion. She was different from everyone else in that she had a relationship with Christ. It was so very different. And so she led me to the Lord, and I realized that I couldn't do it anymore on my own. Everything I was doing was truly a facade of life. It wasn't real life. It was all fake. And it was exhausting trying to make it real. So really, in a moment, everything about me changed, and she noted that even in my face. She grew up in the church, and she's led a lot of people to the Lord, and she said she'd never seen a change like that. But she said, I saw Jesus in her eyes.
Wow.
So, and the change in me was instantaneous.
I want to say something else to that, because I don't, whoever's watching, if you're like me, I love artsy things. I'm a singer, but I told my husband, he just always looks more artsy than I do, and I'm like, I want to look cool like you, And there are times where I've been in a Starbucks and I've seen that very artsy person, It's like I want to reach them and try to be cool or say something cool, but quite honestly,
You don't know what to say.
Diane was the most unsuspecting. This is a Caucasian older lady who looks like she probably leads Bible studies, and she probably does, but it was the genuine love and heart of Jesus that, and she didn't have to be anybody different. She
All
was
she
herself.
She just had to be Diane.
Yeah. So I love that, and I just want to encourage those of you who
Yeah.
maybe feel like you need to change to affect. No, be yourself. Be who God designed you to be, and His light and love is going to shine through and be exactly what people want and need.
The thing about Diane was every time I was with her, I knew she was different. I wanted what she had. I was not going to call it Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I loved her home. Seemed to the walls exuded love, like everything about her house. Even though the house has its issues, like it's just a place that I love to be. Outside of Italy, it's probably my most favorite place to be. You know, and it's just Diane being Diane and the Jesus that is inside of her.
So that night you prayed to receive Christ,
Yeah,
and she saw an immediate change in your eyes and the
Mhm.
light in your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were transformed and really ready to attack life.
Yeah,
But life attacked you
Yes.
9 days later
Yes.
in a horrific car accident, right? Tell us
Yes.
about that.
Yeah, so 9 days after the Lord rescued me, I was driving to work. I worked at a local strip club as a makeup artist. I worked there for a very long time and continued to work there after I was saved. This car accident really just cemented in my mind that the Lord wanted me to stay in the strip clubs because I was actually on my way to work, and I knew the enemy didn't want me to go there. But I was on my way to work, and I was in somebody's blind spot, and I flipped my car and rolled it 5 times on the highway going about 80 miles an hour. And I landed about a foot from a pillar that held up a major road over this highway. And the Lord was even sweet to me because it was summertime and I landed in the shade. Like, I love that part, you know? And I wasn't upside down, I was right side up. And although all the windows were busted, the driver's side window was not. And I crawled through the other side. And I was very disoriented, but even first while I was rolling, like it was the most peaceful moment of my life. It's like I was in space, and I was completely enveloped by just something that was totally safe. And then I crawled out of the car, and I had the choice to go left or right, and I went to the right, and I realized later, had I gone to the left, I would have been standing directly into the highway. And then I noticed that I kind of started to gather myself, and a lady stopped to help me, and I told her, I was like, I just met Jesus 9 days ago. Do you know Jesus? And so you could say I'm an evangelist from the start. And turns out she happened to be a registered nurse, and so that was awesome. The person who hit me did not stop, and she helped me. I started to notice when she was helping me that I had makeup all over the highway. As a makeup artist, that's my livelihood. And apparently I made a big deal about it because I heard the fireman saying, "This is her livelihood, folks." I remember that in the ambulance. And then I got to the hospital and I didn't have a scratch on me. The nurses were literally just wiping the glass off of me. I didn't have a scratch.
After rolling 5 times.
Right.
Amazing.
Yeah, and they said there was no reason like I should be hurt. I mean, I had bruises from the seatbelt, and that was on a Friday. I got the courage to look at my makeup kit on Wednesday, and 99.8% of my makeup was found, and nothing broke, not even a single powder.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the confirmation for me that I needed to stay doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that. What drew you to work at a strip club?
Well, after leaving Starbucks, I went to work for MAC Cosmetics, and when I worked at MAC, I never saw my kid. I was paying for daycare, and I never saw my kid, so I was like, I'm going to start my own business. And I did makeup for weddings, and so then I just supplemented. I was dating someone whose mother decided at 40 to become a stripper, and she got me into this club. And so by this time I think I was still working, no, Yes, I was still at that club. So, but I was the makeup artist, and you just develop this relationship. And I noticed I've always been, God has just wired me, even before I knew Him. People bring me their troubles. I'm a burden bearer. I'm a voice of wisdom. I just always, that's how I'm wired. And so the Lord started to use that, and I noticed that my responses to their problems were changing. Talking about relationships and what a man is supposed to be like, how he was designed to love you. And so then I reached out to some people whom I had met at church, and they gave me an old iPad, and I took it into the club so that I could play, Matt Chandler's Jesus Wants the Rose, or Lecrae videos, or John Piper, and just little sound bites that we could then talk about while I did their makeup. And there was no shame for them because it was earbuds and a little screen.
Right.
And I did that for I think 6 years.
Wow.
So what would they say about that? What would they say about God being a stripper and probably knowing that that wasn't the thing that God would want them to do?
Well, a lot of them don't want it either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing our pastor will say a lot is, no girl dreams of being a stripper at 6.
Mm-hmm.
That's what life, most of them, 99% of dancers are victims of sexual abuse. And so we would get into talking about, they've been groomed for this. And we would talk about how they're reliving their abuse, but as a dancer, they feel like they can take their power back.
Mm.
And it's really a cycle that goes nowhere. But I would hook them up with people who had resources to get them out. So I helped one woman leave the business. She had a pimp, and she would drop money into my locker. And I was saved enough money for her, because when you have a pimp, they take everything.
Yeah.
And so I saved enough money for her that she had enough to leave.
That's great.
So yeah.
That is amazing. And so, did you shift then? You said you were there for about 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
And you're now teaching art as an elementary school teacher.
Yeah. So people were on the fence. Am I doing a good thing with the job that I have, or am I assisting in sin?
Sure.
Which, what business is without sin? There's no difference in doing makeup at a Mac counter for a girl going on a date, or doing makeup for a stripper, right? And I really wanted to develop that even as a nonprofit. The strip club is a money-based business. If I don't take money from them, they won't trust me. And so I even thought, okay, well, they take money from me, we put it in a fund, we have retreats for women with children.
Right.
And that was the idea I had, but the Lord just was not letting it happen. Because around this time, Amelie was in 5th grade, and her learning disabilities were becoming more apparent. She's severely dyslexic, and she also has dyscalculia. And so she needed me at home. And I was like, okay, Lord, what's up? And on my way to work at Starbucks, I worked there a brief time, I rolled my car again.
Wow. Same.
I was turning,
spot?
no, different. It was in Louisville. I turned left on a light, and a car hit me, and I rolled. This time I was upside down, and I remember sitting in the ambulance, and I called my mom, and I said, yeah, I rolled my car. And she said, again? And the EMT said, again? And I'm like, yes.
Wow.
And so, and then somebody had offered me a position at an early childhood center in Louisville as an aide. And so a lot of teachers start as aides, and I was terrified. I told God I would never work with children because I don't remember being a child. And so being with especially younger children, and that was a big challenge for me as a mom. So the Lord has been gracious to sanctify me in that way, and I have been in education since 2015. And that summer I realized, oh my gosh, I'm a teacher. I get paid like a teacher. I don't work during the summer. I still get paid in the summer. We can go to Italy. And
wow.
the part of Italy, which I kind of skipped over earlier, when I was working on that creative book, and I realized that Italy was holding me back, I wrote a goodbye little letter to Italy. And that was a big thing in my testimony. Like writing that letter was the hardest thing I had ever done. I didn't know Jesus, but I did know Oprah, so I visualized letting it go. And so I wrote this letter, and it was really hard. I said things, I confessed, right? I confessed that having lived in Italy didn't make me better than someone else. That was huge, you know? And in confessing those things, even professing that one day I would come back in gratitude, not in shackles, right? That opened up space in my heart, and the very next day is the day that the Lord saved me. And I had tried to go back to Italy from 2001 to this day in 2011, so 10 years, every year I would try to go back, and I never got there. And so I let it go. And then in 2013, I found myself as part of, I was invited to the very first Acts 29 Europe conference in Wales as part of the Italian team. And there were like 10 people in the Italian team. And I got to spend a week in Wales, and then I went down to Bologna, which is the hub for Acts 29. And I really wanted the Lord to remove any sense of idolatry for the city of Florence. And so I was like, I'm gonna fast. How do you fast when you're in Italy? So I said, I'm not gonna have any Coca-Cola,
Okay.
right? And so we're in Bologna, and we go to this lady's house to do Bible study on Acts. And she plants an ice cold Coca-Cola right in front of me, you know? I was like, I'm not having it. And in that, the Lord only gave me one day in Florence. And I got to Florence, the whole trip in Wales, I was listening to Italian, not speaking it. Got to Bologna, started to speak a little bit. When I got to Florence, my mouth opened and I was completely fluent.
Wow.
And I had one day, and I walked the city, and I saw two people who hadn't seen me in 12 years, and they called me by my name. You know?
Like, welcome home.
Yes. Yeah.
Would you explain to our audience what is it, the Acts 29 movement, the church?
Okay,
What's
so
the foundation there?
yeah, Acts 29, you know, there isn't an Acts 29 in Acts. And so it's just the continuation of Acts, Jesus building his church. And so it's a network of churches that plant churches. So we're all about churches that plant churches. And so since, I think there's like 700 churches now globally. And since 2015 in Italy, it's gone from 1 to, I think, 7, with several in the pipeline. And a mega church in Italy has maybe 100 people. Yeah. And in my story, when I came to Christ, as I was recuperating from this car accident, I still feel like that accident was to get me to pray, to even say the name of Jesus, because it was just weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had smoked from the age of 13 till I was saved at 33. One day, I had just read in the Bible, who is in Christ is a new creature, right? And I'm sitting on my stoop, smoking a cigarette, and I looked up and I'm like, why am I doing this? And I just prayed. I was like, Lord, take this away. And he did. I quit cold turkey. I haven't smoked since.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, that accident, I really feel like, was to get me to pray, to get me to say the name of Jesus, and to call on the name of Jesus. And so I had just gotten my very first Bible, and I opened up the Bible, and the very first thing that I read in the Bible was Romans 1. And in it, it said, it was Paul's longing to go to Rome, and he said, I long to come to you, but thus far have been prevented. And that was my story. And I just wept, and I knew we would go back to Italy to stay. Yeah.
So what's the journey been like now? You've done YWAM. Explain a little bit about that, and just God's really preparing you. You know,
Yeah.
He has really prepared you for missions.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I went to YWAM with my daughter. That's Youth with a Mission. It was started in the 1960s, I think, by Lauren Cunningham. We did their discipleship training school in Kona, Hawaii, where you have 3 months of just training on hearing God's voice, evangelism, discipleship, that sort of thing. And then you spend the last 2 months serving. And so we went to Haifa, Israel, and to Berlin, Germany. We got to work with some refugees, and I did that with my 13-year-old daughter. And so that has really changed her perspective on things. And the journey to Italy has been really difficult. The Reformation never went past the Alps, and so they literally call Italy the missionary graveyard, because missionaries typically don't last more than 2 years in Italy because it's so hard, and the fruit is slow in coming. And so you have small pockets. Less than 1% of Italy is evangelical Christian, and that includes any denomination, but most are Pentecostal charismatic. And so that was another reason why I did YWAM, because they are more on the charismatic side. But in Ephesians it talks about knowing the breadth and the depth of God's love with all the saints. And so I wanted to be able to not shut down, but to encourage, to be mutually encouraged, as that scripture in Romans beckoned me in the very beginning, And so we did YWAM, and we came back. And my church, has really just had a maturation process, and I have been caught in the growing pains of that. But the Lord is faithful, and through all of this, the Lord has just gifted me with patient endurance, and that is exactly what one needs to flourish in Italy. Mm-hmm. For example, I got to teach English at a evangelical camp in Isola, which is about an hour and a half outside of Rome, and there's faithful evangelical presence there for the last 65 years, and there are only 34 members in the church.
Wow.
We're seen like Mormons over there, and so the need is great, especially post-COVID. The country has endured such trauma and the loneliness, and people are open because they want answers. And so we're going to a church that has 6 members, if you can believe that.
Soon to be 8 with you
soon
and
to be
Hollie?
8, yes. There are 6 people, and my pastor he films his sermons with his little iPhone 8 and his headphones, and at the beginning of coronavirus, he did a sermon on God and coronavirus, and it was viewed 4,000 times in 1 week.
Wow.
And so that's really huge, because there's huge gospel poverty in Italy. If you want to be theologically trained, you pretty much have to speak English, and so the internet is helping to change that. And so when we go to be part of his church, I will be going back to art school, which happens to be at a school that was established by 2 YWAMers, Russian YWAMers.
Wow.
And part of the curriculum for their master's program is it's a 2-year program, and to graduate, you do biblical scenes, and you have to defend them. So my prayer is, what a wonderful opportunity to walk for 2 years with people from all over with biblical themes. And my prayer is that the group that I am with, it is not just a retelling, but rather a story of redemption.
It's amazing to me how God calls certain people to be drawn to certain ministries.
Mm-hmm.
He gave you a heart for Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And we're a great mission field right here in Dallas, Texas. There's a lot of people all around us that don't know the Lord, but He placed in your heart such a strong desire to go back to Italy.
Mm-hmm.
You are truly called to be a missionary in Italy.
Yes.
How can somebody support you in that?
Well, the best way to do that would be to shoot me an email at hollie.taylor@reliant.org. That would be HOLLIE.TAYLOR@reliant.org. Yeah, and
right now you're raising support to be
Yes.
able to go back to Italy with your daughter,
mm-hmm.
study art, and really minister in this small church and lead Italians to Christ.
Yes, absolutely. We are currently 30% funded for the first part of our goal for me to be able to leave my place of employment so that we can fundraise full time, and so those monthly ongoing commitments are imperative. Otherwise, it's just a nice idea.
Yeah. When I think of Italy, I just think of Roman Catholic. I would imagine that there's a large Roman Catholic presence
They're
there.
Roman Catholic like we're Christian.
It's a culture thing.
And if you think of the Bible Belt, we're in the buckle of the Bible Belt, but take that and magnify it by 200.
So a lot of Roman Catholic people in Italy, but lacking the personal relationship with Jesus because they've never surrendered their life to Jesus.
Yes.
And that's what you did. And that's why God blessed you and saved you from 2 rollover accidents and put this calling on your life and is in the process of making it happen.
Yes.
But maybe you have never surrendered to Jesus Christ. Maybe you know who Jesus is. Maybe you've heard his name. Maybe you've heard about the Bible. Maybe you even go to church every Sunday. There is a difference between knowing who Jesus is and knowing him personally.
Amen.
And that's what Hollie's called to do, to help people understand what a personal relationship. Now, she came from the opposite. She didn't want to hear anything about Jesus. She was angry at God. She didn't believe in Jesus. But maybe you're on the fence. Maybe you know a little bit about Jesus, but just never surrendered your life to him. You know, you can do that. And you can watch the transformation that he can make in your life. And that's why we do this show, and we encourage you even right now, give your life to Jesus. Say, Jesus, I want to know you like Hollie knows you. I want to walk with you. I want to have a calling and a purpose for my life, and I want to see the difference that you can make in my life. You know, challenge God. Just say, God, if you're real, show yourself to me in a real way so that I can see you and follow you, and I'll give my life to you. If you would do that, your life will start changing in so many ways. If you have questions about that or about Jesus, you can call us. You can call us at 972-380-0123. Either Tiffany or I will be glad to return your call. Or you can reach out to us at atimetodream@gmail.com. But Hollie and Tiffany and I want you to have a personal, vibrant relationship with your Creator. And we do these shows so you can hear these stories of how Jesus makes us different. Won't you invite Jesus into your life today? Let us know that you did. atimetodream@gmail.com. So for Tiffany and myself and Hollie, thank you for watching and listening to A Time to Dream. Have a great week. Keep dreaming, and may God richly bless.